Welcome to What the World Needs Now with your hosts, Tom Whisinnand and Josh Monroe. We hope that you're able to leave feeling encouraged and ready for another day of changing lives in the field of education as we speak with inspirational teachers from across the nation and world about what keeps their spark lit.
In this episode, we talk with Jacob Chastain, the Teach Me Teacher podcast host and ELA teacher from the DFW area, about the importance that love plays in the classroom and the struggles that educators face from political noise outside the classroom. Without any further ado, Jacob Chastain.
Jacob, thank you so much for being here with us today. For our listeners who don't have the privilege of knowing who you are or your story, could you give us a little background on who you are, where you're from, and what's your role in education?
Yeah, so I'm Jacob Chastain. I work down here in the DFW area of Texas. I'm a 7th grade middle school teacher. The majority of my time teaching in my 8 years I was spent in 6th grade. I did teach 8th grade social studies my first year. We try not to talk about that too much, but that was a thing that did happen. I was a literacy coach for 1 year. I won Teacher of the Year at my campus my 4th year. And then I got an offer to go be a literacy coach at a nearby middle school in the same district. I did that for a year. I learned a lot, realized I wasn't ready to be that distance from the classroom. I even midway through that, I forced them to kind of like give me a class because I was just dying without students. And so I knew I needed to go back. So I went back to my home campus and I've been there ever since. Outside of that, though, I am a dad. I have a son and a wife, and I also run 2 podcasts. I have the Teach Me Teacher podcast, which most people know me from, if they know me at all. That podcast has been going this is our 6th year. And if you would have talked to me back then when I started that thing and said I would still be doing it, and not only doing it, but having, a sponsorship from Heinemann and, making money off of it and getting 2 book deals off of it, like I would have been like, no, you're a wild person. But it's been fantastic. I've met so many amazing people through that podcast. And the most important thing about that show is that it's allowed me just to connect and learn, like literally all the time. When you talk about education for over 250 episodes, you walk away with so much knowledge and insight and perspectives that are really valuable. But on my second podcast, and I'm actually really excited about this one, is we've been doing it for about a year. It's called Craft and Draft, and I do it with my colleague, and it's a different format. It's just us really sharing, and it's so much fun. And we take tons of listener questions and just talk reading and writing workshop in the middle school classroom. And I just have a blast doing that. We record for about 45 minutes to an hour every Saturday, and it's just so much fun to do that.
That's awesome. That's really cool. And I love what you say about collaborating and learning and just being exposed to different ideas. You walk away with the knowledge, and you walk away with, I think, maybe a better understanding of education and what's going on in the other people's space. That's huge.
Yeah. And I mean, even I'm sure you guys have seen this too, just being on social media and just interacting with teachers. And it's teachers are great. Like they really are. And you learn so much just by talking shop and asking questions and diving in deep. But, every teacher at every level I have found, I've had first year teachers on there. I've had veteran teachers on there who have been doing it for more than 35 years. I've had retired teachers. I've had teachers who've quit the profession, and I've learned I've learned so much from every single one of those conversations that I don't even know what kind of educator I would be without those talks today, because it's kind of cool to have a platform to where not only can I read a book like this from Liz Kleinrock, I can go reach out to her and say, hey, your publisher sponsors us. Can I have you on? And I can just ask her the questions that I would ask while I was reading. I mean, they really don't get better professional development than that.
No, and your podcast has some awesome people on there, and it's changed the way that I've done my reading block at school. Could you tell us a little bit about how your podcast has changed the way that you did reading and writing? Because I think it's important that people understand the power of what you do.
Yeah, well, that's wild that it's helped you a little bit. I'm always, every time I get a DM or an email or anything, like I'm always convinced I'm talking into the void. I don't care what the numbers say or the reviews. I'm like, I'm literally talking to no one. No one cares about this. That's always my that's how I feel like 99% of the time. So I'm always really surprised when people connect to the show. But I mean, God, this is my 6th year. So I started the podcast. Here, let's talk about the origins, and that'll really shape how I changed as a reading teacher. But when I started the show, I was a relatively brand new teacher. I had been teaching English for a year at this point because I started around my 3rd year. I was reading a lot of PD, but what happened was I was sitting in this professional development at the time. Our campus, we would do these like staff meetings or whatever, and in the meeting someone would always demonstrate some type of strategy. It could be a SEL strategy, it could be a team building strategy, it could be a content strategy. They just whatever, they would just show it and we would kind of take it. And as a new teacher who wasn't very good, I just like soaked all of this in. I was like, yes, this is what I need to learn from all of these experts that are around me. And I realized that I wasn't just getting enough, and I was also like trapped in my corner of the building, so I never really saw anyone throughout the day. And I was like, man, I really want to talk to people. So I went to my principal and I said, hey, I listen to podcasts, and is it like against district rules to like record teacher conversations and like post them? And at first the idea was to just like share the link in an email for everyone and be like, hey, if I'm listening to this, maybe other people want to listen to it too. But then I figured out the easiest way would just be to actually publish it. So I went through that whole process of how does this work, how to get it up. And so once I had it up and people started listening, I started being able to talk to all these teachers. And that really helped me. The first year of Teach Me Teacher really shaped me just in like the basics of teaching, like just for me. And you can kind of tell in the conversations of that first season where I was just like, I was still talking about like, what's a quiet signal? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I was still like trying to just comprehend how to like make a successful classroom environment. And then after that, though, season 2 started with Donalyn Miller, which blew my mind. Donalyn Miller, the book whisperer. For anyone who hasn't read the book and is an English teacher, you have to go read her book. But she lives like relatively close to here. My librarian made the connection for me. And before I knew it, we were having this long conversation, and I was sitting here talking to her about everything that I had learned from her and just diving deep. And what that started, though, that process was me really diving into, when I started teaching reading, I was doing a lot of passages, a lot of textbook work, a lot of stuff like that, a lot of questions. And what I ended up transitioning to is I started with, 15 minutes of reading a day. That was where like my revolution started. And I was like, I can squeeze in 15 minutes. And then once that started working and kids actually started to like reading in my classroom, I realized that they were more likely to be able to read because they were practicing more. I could help the kids who were struggling because they were reading, so I could find out if they were actually struggling or not, rather than just not liking the work because I was handing them boring worksheets. That eventually transitioned into a reading workshop format to where most of the time spent in class was them reading and interacting with stuff that they selected, and I was conferring with them while they were reading. And then that eventually evolved into the writing workshop side, which I talk about all the time now, which is just a combination of all of this, but them choosing their pieces, writing based off of everything that they do, right? And so that's a long way to say the way it evolved was I just became someone who became deeper in my practice. I started trusting being able to apply the research directly. And if I had a question, I would pull someone on the podcast and be like, hey, can you talk to me about this? And then I would kind of just fix it from there. But I mean, I'm an entirely different teacher than I am today because of the podcast. And it really is just talking to people who understood what quality reading instruction is and what quality writing instruction is. And as far as I'm concerned, in the middle school classroom, elementary classroom, and a lot in the high school classroom is just giving kids the freedom to actually fall in love with reading and writing, and then teaching them once you get there. I had a great coach one time that said, you don't teach non-readers how to how to take a test. You take kids who already love reading and you teach them how to use that to pass something. Same thing in writing. You don't teach non-writers and teach them to write an essay. You take kids who already love writing and have control over writing, and then you teach them how to bend that into some of the more standardized things that we have to do. And it solves a lot of problems.
I love your passion. And so, like, I think back to when many, many moons ago when it was like I was sitting at Wayne State College up here in Nebraska, and man, I had no idea about education. And here you are, an author. Here you are on podcasts. You're still teaching. Like, what was the genesis? What made you say, I think I want to be with kids every day, and not just kids, but middle school kids, and really get right, but get them to love reading and writing. Where did that all start?
It's funny. Just it reminded me that you said that. My our crisis counselor came into my room for something yesterday, and it was a Friday, and it was a game day for the 7th grade volleyball team. So I mean, anyone that's ever taught on a game day on a Friday to middle school, things can get crazy. And she just sat there for a minute. She goes, Chastain, how do you do this every day? And I was like, I really do like it. Like there's something about me that really does love it. But I mean, the genesis of how all of this happened is kind of wild to me. I mean, my growing up, I had, I basically lived in a world where I wasn't sure if I was going to get picked up from school. I wasn't sure if I would have electricity when I went home. I wasn't sure if I would be eating cold food, frozen food, no food. It was just kind of whatever. I didn't know if one of my parents would go out in the middle of the night and not come home. I didn't know if my mom was going to get beat that day. And being in that world, what ended up happening was I became really attached to schools. I loved being, now this didn't mean I was a good student. There's a difference. But I really did. I loved being in the schools, and I loved, this is where I loved reading. And, my 5th grade teacher, Mr. Hansen, he developed a love for reading in me because he was the first teacher who showed me that books don't always have to be about dead dogs and sad boys. You can pick up a sword and go kill a dragon, and yeah, I remember him reading the illustrated version of The Hobbit to us, and that just changed my life forever. Because I was like, holy crap, there's stories like this in the world, like this exists. And I became a fantasy nerd from there. So, I mean, he changed the trajectory. My 3rd grade teacher, Mrs. Coffee, sang to us all the time and really just made us feel safe and secure. My kindergarten teacher, Miss Hernandez, taught us, she helped us learn Spanish and took care of us. And to this day, I still run into her every once in a while, and she still remembers my name. And middle school is kind of a blur. I don't really remember a lot of my middle school teachers. I always feel bad when I start name dropping people because they're the ones that that was when my family really fell apart. So I just have a lot of gaps in memory from that time. But in high school, my I was on drum line. So my drum directors took care of me when I totaled my mom's car. They were the ones who came and picked me up because I didn't have anyone else to call because my mom was in jail and my dad was gone. My English teacher, Miss Hammer, taught me freshman year and senior year. She's still my colleague. I talked to her the other week because I was like, I need advice. Can you help me? So I had all of these adults who were not only my teachers, and they guided me through that way, but they took care of me. And like I said, I wasn't the best student, especially in high school. I didn't have anyone telling me what to do. I was off partying on the weekends or whatever, and maybe I would show up to school that day, but they all made sure that I was taken care of. They brought me in. And so I had this really big attachment and respect for education and educators. But when I graduated, I didn't know what I was going to do. No one had been to college in my life that I knew. And so like, I kind of went to our local community college, and, I kind of floundered there. It was okay. It was fun. I moved out the moment I turned 18. So I was living on my own, making, minimum wage with my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, and, living in this like apartment and just kind of, doing the whole, like, I'm 18, 19 thing. I kind of have like freedom. I was in bands. So like, I have my drums behind here. I was playing, drums in like rock bands and metal bands and stuff. And that was fun, but I really wasn't doing anything. And then eventually I ended up through a long series of jobs. I was getting laid off at one point later, like several years later. And I called my mentor, Miss Hammer, and I said, hey, I've always thought about being a teacher. I'm about to graduate with my bachelor's. I don't know what I'm going to do necessarily, but I'm losing my job. Is there any way I can start getting some experience like at the school as like an EA or a sub that might help me like figure out if this is really what I want to do. And she said, sure. And so I went in for an interview, and they basically liked me so much that they gave me the opportunity to go through an alt cert program, and I got hired pretty much on the spot. So I found out, I went from not knowing I was going to be a teacher to going to an interview, to getting into an alt certification program, to getting hired as a probationary teacher at my campus within like a month, and passing my content test. I found out I passed the content test like the Friday before I started. So like, and so like I got thrown into this middle school that is extremely hard to work at. I love it to death. There's a reason I've been there for 8 years, but it is not for the faint of heart. And I was teaching 8th grade, and I had no idea what I was doing. And I just kind of survived on the grace of everyone who supported me. And about halfway through the year, though, I realized that this is what I'm here to do. Like my when I started sharing, my stories with my students and hearing their stories, what ended up happening was we bonded in a way that they started to trust me in a way that I didn't expect. And I realized that I was a safe person that they could talk to. I wasn't a teacher that was trying to just say everything's great. You just got to put a smile on your face. It's not true. And like kids that go through trauma, a lot of people that haven't lived through that don't realize that it lives inside you forever, and it affects you in really strange ways, and it stays with you, and it manipulates how you learn and how you process information. And when students there's this weird connection that happened when I was able to realize that's who I was. And I have developed tools over time that I can kind of work with them in the process of going through this to help them in school. I mean, and it was done from there. And I've been obsessed with the job ever since, because it's like, oh my God, there's so much pain in our community, and there's so much trauma in our community, and there's so much need here. And I feel like I'm not a particularly religious person, but my existence, if I could say one thing, is that all the pain and suffering that I went through as a kid, it led up to me being able to, it's like I suffered so that I can help others not suffer so much. And I can't, as an educator, I just can't get around that.
And you outline a lot of this in your first book, Teach Me Teacher, correct? It's like a memoir of your life and how teachers helped you to get to where you're at. And you are at the campus that you went to school at, right?
No, I'm in the same district. I've been in this district since kindergarten. But I'm at like the sister school. So I went to a campus called North Richland, and I teach at Richland. So I'm like the south side of where I was.
Gotcha. That's awesome. And I think there's a lot of power in that, like teaching in the area that you grew up in. What the kids are experiencing. You've got that knowledge for them, as you were explaining.
Yeah, I mean, the wild thing is when I totaled my mom's car, my campus is literally right down the street from where I do it. So I drive past that spot every morning. I go down that road every day, and I go where the guy hit me from, because I was pulling out of a stop sign when he hit me. If he would have hit my door, I would have probably been dead. I mean, he literally missed he thought he killed me, because I passed out after he hit me as it spun the car, and I just kind of sat there, and I was fine. The worst, I had like a hurt neck or whatever, but I didn't have any major injuries. But driving past that, it's like and I see my apartments that I lived in when like I would come home from high school, and like I didn't know if it would be like all day working out like on drumline and sweating. I would go home to Texas 100-degree heat, and there'd be no electricity on because they didn't pay the bills. And I see it every day. And so it's like these small reminders, just kind of being in this community that, I made it through. Right. And I always say I was extremely lucky. I have siblings who weren't as fortunate as me. There's tons of people who don't make it out of that environment. And I just feel like everything, and what drives the energy and what drives all the projects that I take on, is literally the fact that it's like, I have gotten to a point that a lot of people don't get to. And I feel like I'm going to waste it if I don't capitalize on this moment to some degree.
You know, you bring up mentorship and how important that was with Miss Coffee in your life, and we had another guest on, Patrick Kieran, Dr. Kieran from New Jersey, that talked about meaningful coincidences and how we bump into certain people at certain times, and it really sounds like, you know, your drumline directors and some of these other teachers that really like mentored you along, even if you didn't know they were mentoring you, you know, at that time, like that's that's huge. That's something I enjoy about teaching. Just, you know, those relationships and how huge they are in education. Um, I just I can't overstate that enough. You know, and it sounds like you've experienced that and been the beneficiary of that, like all throughout. So
Yeah, I mean, it's also cool to be like, because I've been in this district forever, and it's really fun to like go to professional development. A lot of the teachers are retired, but a lot of them aren't. Like a lot of my high school teachers were younger, so like, you know, I just go like buddy up to them at a training, and I'm like, hey, and they're like, oh my god, why don't this kid just leave me alone? But no, it's been super cool. Like, and my teachers have be a lot of them became my friends, and a lot of them have guided me. Like for in my 8 years, I've had 5 different principals in 8 years of teaching, and 4 of those 5 were my teachers. So, I mean, mentorship all the way literally from being a kid to in my adulthood as an educator. And I'm incredibly fortunate to be where I'm at and to have all of these experiences for sure.
that's awesome. That's so cool.
I'm curious, with that many principles, is it tough to keep the culture at your building? Like, I just feel like it would be changing with each new personality that comes in. Um, is there a lot of turnover? Because sometimes I feel like when new administration comes in, if people don't jive with them the right way, teachers bounce. Um,
Yes.
so I'm just curious what that's been like at your campus.
Yeah. I mean, I've talked about this a lot. Like when I've done my leadership podcast, like when I had Todd Whitaker on and Jimmy Casas and all them, we've so I had my first principal. She was there for a while, but then when I got hired, I was only under her for a year. And then the next one was 2 years, and the next one was 2 years, and then I left. So there's one more, and then we have the one that we currently have. And we've had massive turnover. So I got hired with about 18 other teachers when I started. I'm the only one left in that group that got hired. There's a few people who have been there for a while. Like we have the teachers on my campus that come to love that what we do on that campus and understand the importance of the work. There's a lot of us who have been there for a long time, but I've been through several phases of everyone leaving, everyone kind of going on to do different things. Even last year, which I actually thought we kept our principal, who I love absolutely. She's been a fantastic mentor to me. But even under her, we lost a lot of people last year for a variety of reasons. Some of them, they go off to another school or whatever, but some of them are just like, no, I don't want to do this. And that's been really interesting because I have seen different versions of my campus so many times. Like when I started, where there was tons of fights and just people kind of miserable. We had teachers who I remember specifically our science department when I first started. We lost like 3 teachers that year, just in mid-year. They were just like, nope, I'm done. Peace out. And so like me is like, like we spent time, like this was before COVID, right? But we were still, so we had subs, but we had, like I remember going in and covering all of these classes as a new teacher and just watching, anyone that's ever experienced that. I mean, it's just chaos because these kids have no sense of normalcy. They have no boundaries. They're just, it's just the kids. It's just like trying to make sure no one dies at that point. Right. And like nothing bad happens. So I've seen many of those instances. But when we got our second principal, the culture entirely changed. He was absolutely amazing. His name's actually James Whitfield. He's been huge in the news right now because of the critical race theory madness that's been happening down here in Texas. I mean, he was on CNN, New York Times, but he was one of the best leaders I've ever had. He taught me in geography in high school, but he changed the campus. He made it like that was like people were energized. Like if like there were teachers were there, like, you know, it's people always say, you know, have your boundaries, but people were on the weekend, not because they felt like they needed to, but because they wanted to. They wanted, you know, this is when, you know, we went to the Ron Clark Academy and we really discovered the beautifulness of what schools could be. And we started changing the, you know, we started putting the lights everywhere and changing how we acted and playing music and greeting kids at the door. And, you know, like this whole like culture change of, oh, we can have fun, you know, on campus. But then, you know, we had a shift from him to another principal who was great. And a lot of people like them, but there's everyone that has come in has changed the culture to some degree. And I'll say this though, what's been interesting to watch with all of these different leadership styles and everything that we've kind of done as the campus is the principal that we have now is the first principal that has been able to not only bring in all the staff into decision making and really not play favorites and actually listen to people. Not saying the other principals did play favorites, but there's, you know, sometimes there's a hierarchy that just kind of happens on a campus. But everyone is involved and the kids have been doing well, but this is the first time we've ever competed academically. We have always been last in the district. Every year since I've been there, we have always been last on anything that ranks us. And we, in a COVID year last year, we were number 3. We're right behind the most 2 affluent schools in the district. And, you know, I know, like, anyone that knows me, I don't sit here and push the standardized testing and all of that. Like, you know, I think a lot of that's a bane on the educational existence, but it's a reality that we have to contend with. And I got to say, there is a part of me that was happy to see our underdog school take down some of these schools who thought they had it. And we, you know, we pushed and the kids felt great because they got to celebrate. And it was nice to show that we could not only compete in having the best SEL and the best culture and everything, but we could also take these outdated standardized practices and kick your butt in that too. So this is the only time that we've ever done that before. So, and that's not saying something light. I mean, it is hard to take a transient group, meaning kids who just move all the time. They're really never at the same campus for too long, and dominate campuses where kids stay there forever and have great support. So it's been a wild ride to see all of these leadership changes, but it's a reality a lot of teachers have to do, unfortunately.
Well, and it's got to be pretty cool too to see where you were when you first started and where you're at now. Like to see all of that change come to fruition. That's got to be pretty cool.
For sure. I mean, it's like I said, so we did this we do these things like convocations, right? Where you have you know, your like they bring all the district together and they celebrate. And there was this one year where they put up this chart literally in front of the entire district and it was showing where everyone ranked. It was so funny because I just couldn't help but laugh because it's like all the middle schools were kind of like together and then us, like we were like way down here. And it was so funny because it was like, how could you possibly think that this was a good idea, right? Like it was like someone didn't think that through. And it's never happened again, so I imagine it didn't go over well. But being able to not like, because we've always said, like, you know, I've met people. My son goes to our is in the same district too, and like I've talked to principals and I've done like district trainings and people are like, oh, what campus are you from? And I'll tell them, they go, oh, like, you know, like there's like a tinge of, oh, you're at that school, right? You're at the, you know, you're at the school that we don't, the shadow school, right? The school that's had 5 different principals in 8 years, and you know, that where all the fights happen and everything, and where we don't even have a bench for our sports teams because too many kids fail, right? Like we've always traditionally been that campus, and now it's like, what are you going to say, right? Like now it's like not only did we do it, but we did it in style and we had fun, and we didn't compromise any of our love for what we did. We didn't overly test prep. We didn't you know, we didn't take away workshop and giving kids choices and stuff. What we did is we doubled down on those things. We doubled down on giving kids freedom to choose what they wanted to read and write and teach them through that. We doubled down on the workshop model. We doubled down on empowering kids through their voices and experiences and stuff. And it was like, because that's usually traditionally they're like, no, you have to test prep, you have to do all this, you have to do all this. And I'm like, no, you don't. And we got to sing we got to kind of walk or prove that this research works. And that's kind of why, like, I've been loud about all of this, is like, I've literally seen the change on my campus. And I know not every place is the same, but when something works, teachers are like, please try this. Right.
Yeah. Alex Kajitani, an author and a speaker, says if you have something going on in education that's great, you shout it from the rooftops. Let people know, please. So it sounds like you're doing that. Thanks for sharing with us. We have a lot of people that listen who may be new. They may be in teacher education courses in college right now. What would you say to them if they're considering education, if they're thinking about being a teacher? What advice do you have for them?
I think the first point of advice that I that I want to say really is, if you're getting in during COVID era teaching, just remember that things were different before this. Like,
True.
I mean, it's,
True.
it has been wild. And here's the thing, last year was probably one of my best years. So it's not like COVID is ruining the educational system. It depends on where you are, in all honesty. But it is hard. I mean, teaching in a pandemic and it's not even because it makes the job harder. It's because everything that happens around the job has made teaching harder during a pandemic. It's people seemingly not being able to make decisions all the way up from federal government down to district boards, right? And that's causing a lot of unnecessary stress on us who are actually in the job. I mean, how many times have I opened my email to find out there was some other mandate or some other things literally while I'm teaching? I'm like, okay, like, sweet. And so that has been a big pressure. So just keep that in mind. We will make it through to the promised land of this time period. But for teachers jumping in, I mean, I think what the biggest piece of advice that anyone can do is be honest about the struggles that it takes to get good. Teaching is one of the weirdest professions in that there are very few people that jump into this thing a rock star. I've seen them. There are some people in their freaks, and I don't know how they're so good at what they do when they start, but 99% of teachers are horrible when they start, and that's okay, right? Like, if you can just survive, they talk about that survival first year for a reason in teacher circles, because it's very much true. You're just kind of, it's so much, when you're in a classroom and you're learning and you're passionate, you're like, yes, I want kids to learn and I want them to be able to do math and know history and be able to read and write. That's great. But when you have 25 kids all distracted every 5 seconds when you're trying to talk, that's an entirely different scenario. And so for first year teachers and for anyone jumping into the profession at first is, do what you do because of love first. When you speak to kids, when you're disciplining kids, do it with love, do it with compassion, do it with empathy, because even you're going to have days when kids are driving you insane. You're going to have days when it feels like no child is learning. You're going to have days when, like, especially if you're in middle school, you're going to have days where like kids tell you off, right? And like, or like, I don't care what you do. Like, what are you going to do? Right. I have found that in those moments when I'm being tested and my patience is wearing thin or whatever, if I immediately realize that they are a child and that a child exhibiting a behavior is demonstrating a need, and that I need to find out what that need is as the educator, and I need to do everything in my power to do what I need to do first, it changes the whole dynamic of the learning process. It doesn't make it easier, but blaming parents, blaming the child, blaming systems, blaming anything else is an easy cop out for not putting in the work to make it better. That's not saying teachers can change everything. It's not saying that systems don't cause problems, that a lack of parental involvement can cause problems. All of that is true, but it doesn't do anything to blame that in that moment. It doesn't help you. It literally doesn't, because you can't change that. So as a teacher, I think that people need to just be reminded that you can control you can create the environment in your classroom that you want. You can build those relationships with those kids to where even if you have to discipline them, they walk away better for it, right? There's a difference between having high expectations and strong discipline and being a bully. And I think sometimes we sometimes people, they want to be the tough teacher. And, I yelled quite a bit in my early years, and I never yell now. And it's not because I'm not loud. And it's not because of that. It's because I don't feel the need to, because my kids already hear yelling all the time. Right. And so coming from a place of love, coming from a place of compassion, coming from a place of understanding that we are in a human being business. Kids are not robots. Kids are dynamic and complicated, and they have all kinds of things happening to them at all points in time. It really does humanize this. And I think the more we humanize what we do, the better off we'll be in any type of difficulty that we have. So for first year teachers, if you can channel that your first year, you're golden.
You're good.
Absolutely. And a lot of what you're talking about is with those restorative practices, when we remember that we are teaching kids, even high school teachers, that we are working with kids, and we want them to learn, we want them to grow, but we got to love them and treat them like humans. We got to remember that. I think it's important too, as you're saying, for us veteran teachers to do some reflecting on how we've grown so that we can help those first year teachers. Like, hey, I know you feel like today was bad, but look at this great thing you did. You gave that kid a high five as he walked out. He's going to remember that. He's going to want to come back because of the way that you loved him. So don't worry about the fact that the lesson blew up. I think that's awesome advice for our first year teachers.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on in education, and you talked about teaching in the pandemic. Tons of stuff going on. What do you think the most pressing issue facing education right now is?
Oh, there's a lot. There really is. The one thing that having Teach Me Teacher has done is I get a lot of emails from people who are struggling where they're at, and they feel like they're not supported. And, teachers are like, they feel like I'm a better source of professional development than their campuses. And I love that I can be that, but that's sad. It's sad that there's communities of educated adults who it's their job to educate children and protect children and support children. And they have a community where someone feels like listening to strangers on a podcast more than the people around them. And I think that's an incredibly sad thing sometimes. I'm glad that I can be that for them. But the thing that I keep seeing specifically right now is, burnout is incredibly real. I think I get really worried when great teachers don't have support and they quit too early, and or they're just suffering. And if the adults are suffering in the space, then the kids are definitely suffering in the space. And that's my greatest worry, is that we have a system in place that is oppressive to the needs of adults and children. And what happens is educators that go beyond this, a lot of what happens in schools that are doing well and in classrooms that feel energized and kids are happy to be there, a lot of the times that's because educators close their door and do their job regardless of what they're being told at their district. That's just a fact. And I think the biggest issue is we educators have, we share a lot of what we do, and we come together. And teacher Twitter is very vocal about a lot of the problems in education. Instagram takes a little bit different approach, and Facebook's kind of all over the place, depends on your community. But each teacher space, and TikTok obviously has its rising fame of educators interacting in different ways and highlighting parts of education. But I feel like we aren't pushing for change enough beyond our schools. I really do think that educators, we are one of the biggest voter bases on the planet, but specifically here in Texas, we have teachers that vote completely against the whims of their public education passion because of staunch party lines that they stay on. And I think that if we want to create places where the best teachers aren't being burned out because they're pushing them so hard, and newer teachers don't quit before they really get good. And like I said, it takes time. I mean, 3 years, right, is like bare minimum to find out if you're really in this thing. 5 years is when I started feeling like competent in what was going on. But I think that we really have to start pushing for the changes that will support educators and education. And I think a lot of that comes from perception. I think what you guys are doing is fantastic. People sharing what they're doing on the internet, I think, is extremely important. When I had Mr. D on the podcast several years ago, we talked about the quote unquote revolution in education. And it's all about the perception of teachers for so long. I mean, teachers have always been the butt of the jokes because everyone's had one, right? It's really easy to make fun of teachers the same way it's easy to make fun of politicians. You know what I mean? It's just everyone knows it. So everyone feels like they have an opinion on what education is. But I really do believe that if you have the capability and the wherewithal, you should push to start changing this perception of what teaching is. We should be sharing what it's like, the good and the bad in the educational world. What is learning actually like? When you hear these debates about what should be taught in schools, what shouldn't be taught, it's because people don't know what's happening. They have no idea what it's like to teach. This is why you still see shows on like TV or whatever, that or pictures of classrooms and every kid is in a row. I know rows still exist in the world and some teachers find them useful, but most, like, there's collaborative learning groups now, and we have kids in tables, and all of these kids are moving and dancing and doing all these different things that are going on. We have evolved as an educational system, and no one knows it but teachers. And I think that is one of the biggest fundamental problems happening right now, is that we are not being loud enough about education. We let people say that the kids don't say the Pledge of Allegiance anymore. Like, where does that come from? Like, like 5 instances where that happened and the news blew it up. Like, it's absolute insanity. But here's the thing: we can sit here and say we're not treated right, we're not paid well, we're not all of the, and that a lot of that's true. Or we can say, hey, let's band together. Let's show people the amazing stuff. Let's show people all of the great stuff that's happening in schools. How has school changed from when they went to school? And I really do believe that if we do that in mass, that the political climate around schools will change, the parental support around schools will change, and we will actually see the revolution that so many educators are already doing in their classrooms, but that we need to be system wide so we can help the places that it's not happening in.
Yeah, absolutely. I know some parents know schools change because they do math differently, but that's a whole different change, isn't it?
Right.
Jacob, this has been amazing. I absolutely love your passion and what you're bringing to education, and thank you so much for your time. At the end, we always ask the same question, and it's big and it's heavy, but what does the world need now?
I think the world needs to learn how to meet in the middle. We need to learn how to compromise. I think the world needs to listen to the Hamilton musical far more than what they do. I mean, I'm obsessed with it. I'm sorry, but seriously though, like that story, right? Let's use it since I said it. That story is a story of people going through massive problems and coming to great compromises about what needed to happen. We are so divided on every single topic that people can't even listen to the other side right now on anything. And I'm not just speaking politically here. I'm saying, like, we are polarized on every single topic. No one will compromise. And I had one of my mentors, she told me, she goes, it's not this or that, it's yes and I feel like if we start changing our perspective and actually bringing people in and quit being so freaking dogmatic about everything, I really think that some healing can happen in this country. But it's not happening right now because, and people are fed up, right? That's a lot of what's happening on both sides. People are angry that they believe that the system is failing to some degree. And here's the thing: what I want people to realize is that if they say the system's failing for this side, and this side says the system's failing because of the opposite, both can't be true. There's probably gray area where we need to start meeting in the middle and start actually working together to solve these things. And I think it has divided campuses. It has divided, it divides how we work together as teachers, and it divides us on a much larger scale in politics. And I feel like everyone who can needs to start pushing for nuance and start pushing for, okay, so why does someone else, like even having the conversation, why does someone else say this? And I, on Teach Me Teacher, I've tried to model those hard conversations. I bring people on that I don't fully agree with all the time. And what happens when I walk away? I understand their point of view. And sometimes it tweaks my point of view a little bit, right? Not all the time, because I do have my beliefs and what I think should happen in education, but being able to even communicate how why we might disagree, and going to, okay, so I see how you can get there. I don't agree, but maybe we can work together on this. I feel like that is it's missing so much, and it's hard to do, but I think we need that more than anything.
I read someplace that the sign of maturity and the sign of a great mind is being able to entertain ideas that you don't necessarily agree with while checking your emotional reaction to those same ideas. And it sounds like
Yeah.
that's exactly what you're talking about. We disengaged our intellectual selves and we react out of emotion or whatever else it is. So yeah, I think that's fantastic and so needed in today's world for sure.
Yeah, it seems like in the world we've lost that ability to listen for understanding, to sit there and listen to somebody's ideas without having those emotional reactions that you're talking about, Tom.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
need to get back to where we can compromise and come to the middle, listen to what other people have to say, even if we don't agree. And I love how you've done that on your podcast. I forget the two speakers that you had on, but they were talking about critical race theory, and they were both on opposite sides. And even though I didn't agree with one of them, I sat there and I was able to listen, and I had an understanding. Um,
Yeah.
so I love that you're doing that. You're modeling that, not just for students in the classroom, but for educators and people like us. So thank you for that.
No, I thank you for listening, because I was terrified to do those 2 episodes. I literally was. I was talking to my wife. I was like, oh my God. I had them both recorded. They sat on my hard drive for a while, and I went, I was just like, oh my God. But I did everything in my power to make them fair, to make them, I was open about, kind of where I stand politically, so people wouldn't think that I was manipulating the conversation into anything, because I genuinely just wanted to talk. And here's the thing, I had got people will message me and say, well, I didn't disagree with that or disagree, but every single person that's reached out about it has thanked me for just hosting two sides of the conversation in a respectful way. And I think that is, and that's why I know people are tired of this constant this constant non-nuance that's happening. Is so many people are like, oh, well, thanks for having that conversation. I didn't agree with that person, but I'm glad that we have a space to where we can have this. And I just find myself pushing for that more and more, because it's just, all of this stuff that's happening around critical race theory is, I think it is entirely born. Well, there's special interest that's definitely happening, but it's born outside of that, from people that have lost the ability to communicate, and now everyone's frustrated and mad, and now we're just playing the game of who can cancel the other side first. And I think that's a horrible place to be in, because no one is even trying to contend with ideas. Now it's just, you think this, you don't have a voice anymore, you shouldn't belong in this space anymore. And that's an incredibly dangerous road to be on. And I think as educators we should be pushing for this, because the reason education works, the reason why we've had these revolutions in our culture, are because educators believe in the foundation of what it means to be educated. And that means contending with ideas, being able to defend your idea, being able to listen to someone, being able to understand, and being able to compromise to actually find solutions to complex problems that may or may not have black or white solutions.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, Jacob, thank you so much for being with us today. This has been awesome. I love your podcast. Your book is amazing. So it's been a privilege to be able to sit down and talk with you.
Thank you. I said, but I think before we were even on here, I love talking. I love coming on here and chatting with educators, and y'all caught me in the morning, so I had the caffeine energy today. But I appreciate y'all so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's our show. Thanks for tuning in this week. We're so thankful and appreciative that you took your time to listen to our guest, Jacob Chastain. Hopefully you're ready for another week of changing lives, and hopefully what the world needs now is helping you to sustain your inspiration as you enter a new year. If it is, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It helps us continue to get inspirational educators' stories out.
We hope that as you head out, you remember that the biggest factor that plays into student success is you. Your love, your passion, your empathy, your dedication is exactly what the world needs now. Thank you for all you do. Have a good one.